The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the first time in 3 centuries. Representatives from 47 species crowded the crystalline chamber, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and telepathic pulses. At the center of the holographic display, a sight that defied all known physics materialized, ships emerging from the void between galaxies. Elena stood at the observation deck of the council station, her silver eyes reflecting the impossible fleet that hung in the darkness. As the council's chief xenoarchaeologist, she had spent her life studying extinct civilizations. Never had she imagined she would witness one returning from the dead. "They're human," she whispered, her hand pressed against the transparent aluminum viewport. "By the ancients, they're human." Beside her, Moran adjusted his neural interface, the bioluminescent patterns on his Keltharian skin flickering with anxiety. As the council's military advisor, he had studied every known weapon system in the galaxy. What his sensors were showing him made no sense. "Those energy signatures," he said, his dual-toned voice tight with concern. "They're older than our oldest records. Elena, if these are truly human vessels, they've been gone for 1,047,612 years, Elena finished, pulling up her data tablet. "That's when the last human expeditionary fleet disappeared into the dark zone. The council declared humanity extinct 300,000 years. Ego, the dark zone, even the name sent shivers through most species. It was the space between galaxies where physics broke down, where stars died without being born, where matter itself seemed to scream. No ship that entered ever returned. Until now." Moran's military database flickered across his vision. "Elena, those ships, they're not just old. They're wrong. My scanners are detecting weapons that shouldn't exist. Energy manipulation on scales that violate the Korvax limit. They're showing power outputs that would require harvesting entire stars." "That's impossible," Elena breathed. But her mind was already racing through the implications. Humans had been considered primitive by galactic standards, barely achieving faster-than-light travel before their disappearance. They were explorers, yes, but not warriors, not conquerors. The lead ship began broadcasting. The signal was ancient, crackling with interference, but unmistakably human. Elena's translator struggled with the archaic dialect. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet Prometheus. We have returned. We demand an audience with the Galactic Council." The council chamber erupted in chaos. The Vrex ambassador's tentacles writhed in fear. The crystalline lumens shattered into defensive fragments. Only the ancient Krovan elder remained still, its 1,000-year-old eyes fixed on the display. "They demand?" The Vrex ambassador's translator screeched. "A dead species makes demands of us?" Moran's tactical mind was already working through scenarios. "Elena, I need you to tell me everything you know about pre-extinction humanity. Weaknesses, cultural patterns, anything." Elena shook her head slowly. "You don't understand, Moran. Humans were never the strongest species. They were curious, adaptable, sometimes reckless, but they had one trait that terrified the Council's predecessors." "What trait?" "They never stopped. Once they set a goal, once they committed to survival, they became relentless." The holographic display zoomed in on the lead vessel. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Council's largest battleship, but it was the wear that caught Elena's attention. Scars from unknown weapons, hull plating that showed evidence of technologies that had been invented, used, and discarded, battle damage from wars fought against enemies the galaxy had never seen. "Council members," the Krovan elder's ancient voice resonated through every being's mind. "I am old enough to remember the humans. I was young when they left. They were insufficient then, weak. But I remember their final message before entering the dark zone." The chamber fell silent. They said, "We go to find what lies beyond. If we do not return in your lifetime, do not mourn us. We will be busy becoming something greater." Moran's combat algorithms were screaming warnings. Elena, a million years in the dark zone, what could have happened to them? Elena pulled up her research, her fingers flying across holographic displays. "Evolution doesn't stop, Moran. Neither does war, survival, or innovation. If they survived even a decade in that hell, they would have had to adapt. But a million years?" She looked at the fleet and suddenly understood. The ships weren't just scarred from battles. They were evolved. Each vessel showed signs of thousands of different technological iterations. The humans hadn't just survived the Dark Zone. They had conquered it. They had fought whatever nightmares lurked in that cosmic abyss and emerged victorious. "They're not the same species that left," she said quietly. "They can't be." A second transmission came through, and this time there was no static. The voice was clear, powerful, and utterly inhuman in its controlled intensity. "Galactic Council, we have returned from our long exile. We have seen things you cannot imagine. We have fought wars against entities that feast on dying universes. We have rebuilt ourselves atom by atom 1,000 times. We have forgotten more about survival than your entire civilization will ever learn." Admiral Chen's image finally appeared. She looked human, but her eyes held depths that suggested she had witnessed the birth and death of countless stars. Behind her, the bridge crew moved with mechanical precision, each movement suggesting millions of battles fought. "We do not come in peace. We do not come in war. We come with a warning. The Dark Zone is waking. The things that dwell there are coming. And when they arrive, this galaxy will need the one species that learned to survive where gods go to die." Moran looked at Elena, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with a mixture of fear and something like awe. What have they become? Elena watched the fleet. Humanity's lost children returned from the abyss and gave the only answer that made sense. Survivors. They became what they always were, refined by 1,000,000 years of hell. The council chamber remained silent as the human fleet held position, waiting. The galaxy's peace had just ended, and its only hope wore the face of mankind, and